So vulnerability is the birthplace of everything we want more of in our lives. The problem is, instead of having an open heart, we end up with a closed heart. We end up with a protected heart for a lot of different reasons. The worst thing we lose in trauma is vulnerability. But the one thing that will kill it faster than anything else, the one betrayal of vulnerability, is shame. So I am going to armor up and self-protect. I'm not going to let people hurt me, see me, take advantage of me. I am going to talk about what I believe courage looks like and is. So we're going to start here. So I am sitting on about 200,000 pieces of data that I've collected over the last 15 years. And one of the questions I've had from the beginning of my career was simply this: is courage the willing to show up and be seen, even when we can't control the outcome? Is courage something that's inherent in us, or is it something that we can teach and develop in people and in ourselves? And so as both a social worker and a teacher, this is my 21st year in the classroom. So what I've learned in the last couple of years is you can absolutely teach courage. You can develop it in yourself and you can develop it in others. And it basically boils down to 4 skill sets: vulnerability, clarity of values, trust, and what I call rising skills, the ability to get back up when we fall, when we experience setbacks and failures. It's interesting because I didn't think rising skills or resilience was going to be on this list, but as it turns out, the most courageous men and women I've interviewed over the past 15 years talk about their courage only being possible because they know how to get back up when they inevitably fall. And one of the things that's true is that if you're brave enough often enough, you will fall. It's not a question if you might fall, you will, by definition, if you're brave in your classrooms, in your life, with your partners, with your kids, with the people you care about. If you're brave, you're gonna get hurt. I mean, the brokenhearted are the bravest among us because they had the courage to love, right? And so we have to learn how to get back up. But let's start with vulnerability, and let's start with the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to really show up and let people in. How many of you were raised to believe that vulnerability is weakness? Most of us. Here's what I can tell you, and I'll challenge you. I cannot find in 200,000 pieces of data a single example of courage that was not completely defined by vulnerability. Let me challenge you. Can you think of one courageous thing that you have seen someone do in your life that did not require vulnerability, that did not require uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? One thing. I find zero evidence. And let me tell you, I've stood in front of a group like this of special force military people. They can't think of a single example of courage that did not require absolute vulnerability. But we hate vulnerability because it opens us up to being hurt. And we think, I don't want to be vulnerable because vulnerability is the center of shame and scarcity and fear and anxiety and grief and disappointment. So I am going to armor up and self-protect. I'm not going to let people hurt me, see me, take advantage of me. The problem is that when we armor up like that, not only is vulnerability certainly the center of these experiences, it's also the center of these: love and belonging and joy. No vulnerability, no love, no belonging, no joy. What do you think is the most vulnerable human affect we experience? What's the hardest emotion for us to handle as humans? Joy. How many of you are parents? How many of you have ever stood over your child while they're sleeping and thought, oh my God, I love you like so much I can't breathe? And then in that split second, pictured something horrific happening to your child. How many of you have done that? It should be 95% of you. But am I alone in this? And I'll just share this with you. What was the one variable men and women who had the capacity to lean heavily into joy? What was the one variable they shared in common? Gratitude. The only variable that really separates men and women who cannot lean into joy, who start dress rehearsing tragedy. And the reason we dress rehearse tragedy is so we can beat vulnerability to the punch. So what we do is like, oh, this great thing's happening. I'm gonna start picturing worst case scenario so that when I get hurt and it happens, I'm all prepared for it, right? But how many of you think we can actually prepare for that? You cannot. 50% of the people in this room have probably experienced the thing that we dress rehearse, and they could come up here one at a time and tell you, you can practice that all you want. That will do nothing to help you when that moment comes. The only thing you're doing is squandering the joy that you need that builds a reservoir for when hard things happen.